So we'll get into our first question.
Yes.
To really set us off. So what was your inspiration for writing the book?
My inspiration didn't come till later, actually, when I got the book deal. So I told myself I always would write a book. I knew I was going to write a book. I knew I was going to write a book before I turned 50. I didn't know exactly what the book was going to be about. I knew that I had so much experience, and it was something that I even it was like a true goal. Like I was going to write a book. I just had to figure out what it was going to be about. And so the way it all happened and where the inspiration came from was actually when I was approached to write a book through the publisher. They had me still do a book proposal, and I had to decide what the book was actually going to be about. And that's where I had to really turn to like some inspiration, because I didn't know how I was going to, just because I had a lot of things to talk about didn't mean I knew what I was going to write about. So it was like I had to really turn inward to find that inspiration of how I was going to lay it out.
Well, and that kind of leads into the next question, which I know somebody had already mentioned. I think it was Kim had mentioned that she really loved how the book was divided. And I know that was something that I know I also referenced. But why did you end up breaking it up, water, air, fire?
Yeah, so a lot of people have, and by a lot of people, I mean, know me, don't ask this question, but people that we have asked in different interviews, how did you go from a chef to a curandera? And what I always tell them, it was actually backwards. I've always been a curandera. I just happened to also become a chef. And so I think what happened is when I was even approached to write the book, I think my publisher was even thinking it would possibly be a cookbook, just because that's what I'm known for, is working with a lot of like whole foods, herbal, foods with herbal foundations. And I didn't want it to just be a cookbook, at least not for my first book. I wanted to be able to encompass things. And what happened was I thought, okay, a cookbook usually has like, I don't know, appetizers, entrees, desserts, things like that. So I started thinking of ways I could divide the book up. I knew it wasn't going to be necessarily a biography of from, when I was born until now, but I wanted to still incorporate the stories. And so that's where that inspiration came from. And I realized, whoa, everything that I do is connected to the elements. As far as like how I was working with my students, working with my restaurant staff at the time, how I was working with clients, my family, everything was working with the elements. Yeah. So that's how that came about, the water, air, earth, and fire.
Yeah, it really, like, every step of the way was really nice to be able to identify with each of those elements. From the book, recipes are the most personal to you, perhaps. Do you have any special stories that are connected to the recipes that you want to share maybe a little bit deeper with the group that's joined us?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I shared a lot on each recipe, but I think I think there's two that really are just part of my DNA at this point. That would be the beans in the clay pot, just because I have such childhood memories connected to beans always being on the stove, or at least for sure on like, in a pressure cooker, or in the crock pot. Just I always remember that scent of beans. And so because I work with aromatics, I think that it's just absolutely ingrained in my limbic system of scent memory. And so I have a lot of stories. Probably write a whole book or a whole chapter just on beans alone, on how growing them, cooking with them, stories, cleaning them. It's that I think of, with both sides of my family. So yeah, I would definitely say that one. And then the one that people always ask me about is my face oil. I created that oil probably at I want to say I was 26 or something. It was a long time ago. And I've been using it for over 25 years. And I think that everybody, they're just always asking me for that exact recipe. So I feel that that one, not that I grew up with that, but it's such a part of me now. So yeah, those two.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing more.
We
For
have-
those of you, oh yeah.
Hi. We have a question from Alejandra about, she just made a comment that she loves making beans. Alejandra, do you want to unmute and kind of ask the question?
Sure. I was just wondering if you have any recommendations for where to buy fresh epazote. I've always seen it dry, but I can't seem to find it fresh.
Yeah, and even in the book, I said if you can only find dried epazote, to just not even use it, because all of the flavor is in the oil, and so when it's dried, you don't taste it. These you're in Phoenix, right? So the only place that I did fresh is at Ranch Market, and then I go to the one on 16th Street.
We know that
Lovely.
one.
That one's close
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
sometimes I'll buy it and I'll get what I think I need, and I'm only using it, let's say if I'm making a pesto out of it, then it fresh. But if I know I'm just going to be putting it in a pot of beans, I'll buy a fair amount of it if I don't want to go back to Ranch Market all the time, and then I just take it out and use that for the pot.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
For those who might have just joined us, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, where you're calling from, and feel free to ask questions in the chat as well. Or if you'd like to ask yourself, just click the reactions button and do the raise hand, and then Somlin will be able to let us know that you have a question, and feel free to ask it directly. But what Alejandra just asked is actually a perfect segue into this question. So we know that sourcing is incredibly important, not only in this book, but within Indigenous wisdom and cultural practices. So how would you best guide people into sourcing some of the more sacred ingredients like creosote, sea moss, to make sure that they're doing it in a way that's sustainable, and potentially, foraging happen to make sure we're doing foraging in a really sustainable manner?
Okay, so that's a long question of a lot of information. I think where I'll begin is that everyone needs to, and this is not about what you just said, and I want it for everybody, is I think what's happening out there in the foraging world and the wild food world and the medicine world is people tend to say there's herbs and plants, and then there's sacred herbs and plants. And I think it's important that we just remove the word sacred, because in my teachings, I was always taught that every plant is sacred. And so once we label something sacred, then it feels like we're only supposed to be treating that plant a certain way and not that plant a certain way. So that's definitely abuelita knowledge. That's grand knowledge, that even the most simple plant like the epazote is still a very sacred herb. So that would be number one. Say, if you can grow it, that's always going to be your energy, your essence into the plant. Epazote is actually a very easy plant to grow. I've grown it many times with good results. So if you can do that, that's going to help with, making sure you're getting a sustainable plant, an organic plant, and your energy in the plant. I think another layer of that is just seeing whose land you're on. I mean, if you're out there foraging a wild food, you need to get permission first, find out, am I even allowed to be picking this plant? Is this, especially in Arizona, this is, Good Food Arizona, like, am I collecting a state protected plant? We have a lot of indigenous plants here that are very much endangered if people go and just pick them especially if they're on tribal lands, and we are all on tribal lands, even right here in the middle of my courtyard in the middle of Phoenix, Arizona. I'm still technically on native land, right? But on those areas that are designated as tribal nations, and you need to get permission to be there first. And just like really making sure that you're using it in a respectful way, and that it's coming preferably from a native owned source, if that's a possibility.
So thank you so much for that feedback and guidance. So now I think we're going to open it up to those of you who are here. For those of you who maybe haven't been brought up with some of the cultural practices that were found in earth medicines, or, you know, maybe raised with some of the recipes that were in there, how did you connect with the readings? What was an impactful or powerful part of the book that you connected with? Does anybody have?
Yes, I want to know.
Everybody did in some way grow up with some of those practices, which actually, well, maybe some of the thinking. That's another question we have for those of you joining who maybe did grow up with some of these recipes. How did it further connect you to these familial practices?
I know for me, having 3 daughters and being able to connect, making spritzers and balms and playing with fragrance is kind of a bonding experience for my daughters and I that like withstands. It's almost like making a beautiful meal. It's comfort food. It's a comfort act. It's an expression of love. So being able to go through these chapters and be reminded of like these new recipes that I can bring forth to them, and imparting some of those skills of, you know, here are some little secrets that you can do to take care of yourself as you kind of go into your next journey and do that, because I think that there is something so connected about those recipes that my mother shared with me, and being able to carry that down. So for me to have this book and to look through that, it's just another set of recipes that I can share with my daughters and pass that wisdom down to them.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
Anyone else? Anyone else feel that kitchen healer feeling as you were going through the book?
I for sure did. And I think that for me, I grew up with my mom and my grandmother making a lot of like teas. And something that I didn't realize is that like all of these herbs could be used for other things like balms, the satchels that you smell. So it was really cool to see some of the herbs that I've grown up with and heard of be used in a different type of practice other than just drinking tea.
Mm-hmm. Right, that was actually something that I did intentionally, because I didn't want anyone to feel that they had to go and buy, 50 different herbs to partake in the creations of the book. And also a lot of the teachers that I had, they all said the same thing in their own way. What good is like an apothecary of all of these herbs if you're not using them, and that you should really just use 5 really well and know how to use them in all different ways. And so that's why when I was writing the book, that's why you'll see some in, say, a sachet or in a bath or in a balm. I wanted people to really feel like, oh, I can use rosemary in all of these different ways. So maybe for a expert, a clinical herbalist, perhaps they might find this a little boring. But I think for people that are just at that kitchen healer, part of their wellness journey, it feels really, it's less intimidating because you feel like you can use them in all those different ways.
Yeah, I think sometimes we grow up thinking that there's, you use this for just one thing, but it was really nice to see, like my mom's on the call and we have calendula in the garden. And so you know, using it in a salve, but also in the baths, and, you know, what are all the different ways in which you can use its healing properties is really a, you know, an empowering way to connect with those plants.
I agree.
Oh, Carrie, did you want to add something to the conversation?
She might need help unmuting. There we go.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
So when I was a little girl, I was raised by my grandparents, and my grandmother and her sisters always had, well, they had homeopathic remedies, but they also had herbal remedies. And so I grew up thinking that calendula was called calendula. But we used that all the time. And then I got into my teenage years, and I was kind of like, what are you using that stuff for? You know, all these new things, you know, you're so old fashioned, you know. So, but then as a mother, I have a 32-year-old son with severe autism, and he genetically cannot clear things from his body. So any kind of a pharmaceutical or anything is just really problematic for him. So that was kind of my intro to getting back into herbs and studying, you know, what can I use for him? And so I have like all the nervines that I try to incorporate daily for him, and just try to do things for the whole family now. And I mean, there's so much to learn. It's somewhat overwhelming, but you know, bit by bit, I hope to develop, you know, some more skills. But it's really an art. And what I've understood is that, you know, at first I thought too, like more of the allopathic way of like, you use this for that, you use this for that, you use this for that. And now I've come to the understanding that that's just not how you incorporate herbs into your life. And so I'm really excited to read your book. I can't wait to read it and gain some more knowledge, and just know that, you know, anybody who's working in this field, I'm just a big fan, and just think it's wonderful. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And, you know, she brought up a wonderful point of, which I do talk about in the book, is that the American way especially is about, that pill mentality. So it's kind of like, oh, if you have this, like take this, and this herb will make it all go away. But herbs are very different, and plants are very different, and some of them take time and patience, which is something that our society is not used to. So it's about really developing a relationship with those plants, and that's in making and creating that relationship. That's why it's so important that you learn how to use them as a steam, you learn how to prepare an oil with them, you learn how to drink it as a tea, because then you're having this conversation with the plant, and it's allowing you to see all parts of it. So yeah, so thank you for sharing that.
Somlin, I think you have a very special question that you'd like to ask, or a little niche question.
Well, actually, one of the questions, I think I might evolve it and throw in a new one. We have similar hair color, as we've kind of, so please impart some tips on how to like embrace and keep that graying hair so vibrant and pure. Like I embraced it, and so I want to continue to take care of it. So I'm really curious on what you use.
Yeah, so I couldn't tell that your hair was also gray, because just I think from where we are, I thought perhaps it was just like a baby blonde, like a soft blonde. Wow, so that has a lot to do with your environment and which products that you're putting on your hair. Just as an example, like when I decided to allow my hair to go gray, or to come in gray, I had to stop using even some of the herbal preparations that I was using on my hair, because every now and then I would do like a sage leaf with like culinary Mediterranean, or a rosemary, like a really strong tea, a decoction, and I would put it through my hair just to get it really shiny, which was great when my hair was a brunette, when I had brunette brown hair. But it started staining my hair kind of green.
Oh, wow.
And so like you have to be really careful because your hair, I guess, not the cuticle,
The follicle?
the follicle, I think there's even another word.
Oh,
I
the
can't-
shaft.
The shaft,
Yeah.
yeah. It's very different. And so it absorbs everything. So you have to be really mindful of that. We are in a big city where there's a lot more pollution than if we were living out in the country somewhere. And also, if you're places where there's smoke, that will also make your hair, turn yellow. And I have tried, I haven't perfected it, but I was working with blue pea flowers.
Oh.
Do you know what?
Yes,
Yes.
like.
Yes.
Yeah, to tone my hair. So I still don't have it down enough, right, to give you a recipe, but I'm working on it. But it was basically, I was making the butterfly pea flower. That's what it's called. And I mean, it's like the color of this fabric. And you could experiment with that, but perhaps making a wash. But I was trying to get aloe vera gel and then making that with the pea flower and trying to
Do a mask almost.
kind of, but it's something about it. I can't figure it out yet. So I'm still working on it.
We'll stay tuned for that recipe next.
Yes. I think that there's definitely an art to that gray hair and keeping it and embracing it and keeping it its brilliant color. And I'm constantly on the hunt of how can I do this? How can I just make it as brilliant and shiny and
Yeah,
take
you
care of it
can
really
still
well.
just do like apple cider vinegar rinses, but the butterfly pea flower I'm trying. And then when I was at an indigenous food conference, I was in Iowa, and around that area of like the Great Lake area, we had a lot of herbalists come from that area, and they gifted me with violets. I think they were violets. And when I made tea with it, it was that same, it wasn't as dark as the butterfly pea flower, but it was this indigo color. And I thought the same thing. Like, I wonder if I could put that on my hair.
That's awesome. I think as we're in this kind of vein of just transparency and openness, there was a part of your book, and I believe it's actually the section where your husband is kind of holding on to you in the water, but you're really open about, your experience with certain ailments or these life moments of your experience with, for example, the suffering of migraines. Thank you first and foremost for sharing those intimate details, but also I think that, for me as a reader, and I think for probably a lot of the people who've joined us, there's a lot of relation to that. So why was that so important for you to also share those details with your readers?
I wanted to let people know I'm a real person, and even though I'm working with all of these things, I still have my own body aches and pains and ailments. And I think sometimes people think that when, I'm a curandera, I must just be meditating all day or something. But no, I have to go to the grocery store and my joints still hurt sometimes and things, life still happens. And I really wanted people to accept just all parts of me in example that they accept all parts of them, and just how the book can be used for so many different, like I said, the headaches, that is such, unfortunately, looking back, it's such a big part of my life story. I mean, any roommate I had, romantic partner, my husband, my daughter, anyone knows that I've been plagued with these headaches. And it really took a lot of, I guess it was empowerment, for me to figure out what did I need to take out from my diet perhaps, or what could I do to help remedy them naturally, because some of the pharmaceuticals weren't working for me. They were just numbing me out. So I really wanted people to see that we do have options, but again, they take time, and it was about just having patience with the process.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So once somebody has maybe finished the book, what would you recommend as next steps for people to keep learning, practicing? Are there other books, educational places, or suggestions that you can share?
Well, I really hope that everyone returns to the opening prayers to each element when you feel, I don't know, maybe you have little ones and you're taking them to the ocean, or you're teaching them about water protectors out there that are fighting for our water, or maybe you're just drinking a glass of water. I hope that the readers just take a moment every now and then to revisit those prayers so that we stay connected to the elements. Like I said at the beginning, like I really want everyone to feel that they can share the book in a way that feels like, hey, I don't feel like you need this, but I want to help empower you, because that's what it was all about. It was about helping people reclaim that kitchen healer. We all had grandmothers, aunties, and other people in our life, mothers perhaps, that were kitchen healers or are kitchen healers. And some of us don't remember those memories. Perhaps it skipped a couple generations and we don't have those. So I want it kind of to be like a auntie and just say, hey, like, go ahead and open the book, and perhaps that will give you some inspiration to connect with one of those elements and start bringing that healing back into the home.
You've come full circle, and your knowledge is really center stage on large platforms. How has that felt for you?
Oh, I'm ready for it. I have been putting out into what we call the universe for a long time that I really do want to do a show featuring an Indigenous person, a brown woman, going around and talking about our medicines and from around the world. And so I'm enjoying the exposure just because as a person of color, there's not a lot of us out there with lifestyle books, with cookbooks, with herbal books, a lot of medicine, a lot of our traditional medicines and traditional foods even have been written by non-native or non-indigenous people. So I feel like we're finally at 2022, or maybe a couple years ago even, in this space where we're being given the microphone, I guess. So it feels really good. And so any media and anything that's coming my way, it's a little exhausting at times, but I'm actually just embracing all of it because I realize what a privilege it is to finally be now at 50 and just in the last, say, 5 years being asked about Indigenous foods. And yet here we are in the Southwest and seeing our foods out there, seeing our medicines out there, but with no representation or the stories that come with it.
I'll open it back up to the audience. Is there anything that maybe inspired you, or is anything else that anybody in the audience would like to share? Any further questions you might have? Oh, is Earth Medicines available in Spanish?
I wish it were, but writing a book has been a whole new process and journey for me. I've never done this before. I didn't know what to expect. And so I thought, let's get the book translated in Spanish. But it turns out that I actually need someone to buy the rights of the book and then have a translator translate the book. So once we're working on that. So hopefully that will happen because I really feel the book would actually do very well in different communities that are primarily Spanish speakers. So yeah, fingers crossed.
I would love to ask the audience, what were your favorite recipes? What were the recipes that you earmarked to try or that you truly connected with? Anyone willing to share?
Oh, there we go.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, my connection might be bad. Let me turn off my video. I really enjoy taking baths. And so there was a recipe for like a cleansing bath that I tried, and it left me feeling so like refreshed. Like we usually incorporate salt and like calendula and some lavender in the bath times, but incorporating, I think, the baking soda and the 2 different types of salt gave it a different, I don't know, I felt leaving like much more refreshed after that particular bath than I usually do. And it was wonderful.
Yay. I think everyone thinks I have the whole book memorized, but I don't. But I think that was the alkaline spiritual bath, if I remember correctly. So I think why that felt really good for you, this is just my 2 cents, is because the most important ingredient was that you made it.
Yeah, it's not just a bath bomb. You throw
Right.
in,
You didn't
yeah.
just go grab it from, Sprouts or something. It was actually something that you created, and that always will just feel different and more special and magical.
How about you, Kate?
Hi, I have actually not read the book yet, but after hearing the bath story, I am so looking into ordering this because bathing rituals have just been something I'm super interested in. But I just wanted to thank you guys for hosting this conversation. There's such positive, almost maternal energy in all of this. And I really identify with what you said earlier about that generation who feels separated from this wisdom. And I just totally appreciate you extending being an auntie, and I am so accepting that. And I just wanted to say thank you again. Thank you both.
Thank you, Kate. I love hearing those things because those of you that have followed me on Instagram for many, many, many years, that was one thing that everyone always would say, was that I didn't I remember maybe a grandmother doing something, or I had an auntie that did that, but I missed out on all of that. So I do feel like an auntie, like I'm sharing some things for them. And on that note, if you were following me on Instagram, I have a new account now because my account was impersonated, but that's another story. Yes, follow me. It's just that my name, Felicia Cocotzin. I'm starting all over again with a whole new community and those that are trying to find me again. But I would say a lot of people that have followed me over the years, I definitely have a very strong foundation of Chicana women because they can identify with me and my story and my family. But I have a lot of other people that follow as well because I want it to be what I've always said was the medicine of the people. And so for some of us, the medicine of the people ended, let's say, with our mothers growing up in the 40s and 50s and missing out on all of those healing ways. But then that's why we might remember like a grandmother or even a great grandmother. And so for some of us weren't blessed to have all of that information. So even though the information might be not quite what your family did, it's what I say throughout the book is to tap into your own ancestors and maybe even do a little DNA research and see where you can somehow bring in those ancestral salts or herbs and things into any of the little potions that I have for you to make so that you're like empowering yourself, but you're also healing your family lineage. And for maybe those family members that didn't have the opportunity for whatever reason, maybe they were also disconnected from their family herbal ways. And so this is like you're bringing back all of those stories and you're helping heal all of that lineage.
And for those of you who don't have the book yet and are looking to get it, we actually have a really awesome partnership with the local bookstore Changing Hands that's offering a discount. So we'll share, if you need that information, you can find it on our website at the goodfoodaz.com on the book club page. You'll see it there. But yeah, hopefully that's also helpful in making sure that you can purchase the book for your own consumption. And I know it says here in the chat, Alejandra also was just saying how stunning the imagery throughout the book was as well. It's really
Yes,
beautiful.
I will let the photographer know. She couldn't be on today's call, but we've actually, so I want to just say, well, thank you for saying that, because I think every interview I've done now for the book, everyone says that the photography is stunning. And as a storyteller, I wanted a photographer that was a storyteller with her lens. And the two of us have been friends for over 15 years, and she's taken photos of me professionally since my daughter was 3. So maybe it's actually more than that, because my daughter's already 21. And so when I got the book deal, they were actually they're out of Boulder, Colorado. They were going to assign me a photographer and have them fly to Phoenix, and we were going to knock out the whole entire book photography in one weekend. And I said, that doesn't feel right to me. I just have this feeling that the book will be that more magical if someone I know really well and knows me can do the photos. So I think as you're like flipping through the book, you really do see that this is not just like those photos where everything's like looking down at the table or everything is the same. Like, we were able to travel to California, to all over Arizona, to New Mexico, and we just really used my actual real things, right? How novel. So
You're right.
the book feels like you're almost looking at like a peek into my notebook, or even just like little pieces of my home, like little secret spaces of my home.
Yeah, they do. I think they convey that intimacy, and it's like capturing real moments. It's not just staged for the camera, which I think we often can see that.
Oh yeah, like everything had to look just so, and we didn't mind if things looked a little almost unfinished or messy. My goal with the book was, if I was making something, I would tell the photographer, whose name is Nikki, I would say, let's just pretend I'm making whatever the recipe is, and I had to get up to go take a phone call. That's what I want the image to resemble, that feeling of like it's not quite done.
Oh, and Kate is just asking if there's an ordering link you can share. I can definitely share information with you, Kate, after this for sure. I have your information. And then yes, Alejandra's just saying the lighting and the colors are so good. Thank you for sharing. I think we're kind of done with questions unless anybody else has something, but would you like to share kind of what you're doing now and maybe some future information that people might be able to take part in?
Yeah, so I have a lot of projects on the horizon. I'm in many places right now at one time, and I'm super excited because on April 28th, because we are, it sounds like, all here in Phoenix, I will be on 44th Street-ish in Camelback, and I'll be doing my first local book signing here. We had a lot of pause in between the release date until today, and so we finally have that organized. You're welcome to bring your book to the event, and I'll be happy to sign it for you. And all of that information I'm going to be sharing so that we can make sure you know where it is if you'd like to go. But in the meantime, I will be at the Desert Botanical Garden doing some curandera walks. I'm going to be in and out of town with some different projects. And people keep asking me if I'm going to be writing when my next book is. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like really, but I really am starting to kind of brainstorm and keep note of some ideas, because I know that I am going to write another book, but it's going to be a cookbook. I just don't know yet. It took 2.5 years to write that one. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'll say before I'm 60 then, maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, it was a pleasure answering your questions and being in conversation today.
Yeah, thank you to everybody who did join today. For those of you who haven't gotten the book, cannot recommend it enough. And I think, like Felicia was saying, it's something that hopefully you can always go back to. It's not a one and done for sure. And so, and stay tuned for our next book. Again, this is a book club, and so we'll be starting soon at the end of this month. We are Each Other's Harvest, which is focusing on Black farmers, Black food producers, and the stories of cultural practices as well as farming practices, and how we can be better supporters. And yeah, I'm really excited for us to be starting that one. So thank you again, and have a really beautiful Wednesday.
Sounds good. Bye, everyone.
Bye.